On the technique, I've actually, the technical people around here will say that you should go out with the headphones.
Headphones, people
I
hate you
actually
when you
gave
don't
up
do
on
that.
it finally because I felt like when I go out, especially in the winter, I feel like I have too many straps. I don't, I have a thing that slings across, you know, the Marantz slings across my chest. I have the mic cord to worry about not having that bump in, you know, create a mic noise. I finally thought something's got to give, you know, and I thought these things.
Go.
And it made my life instantly
No, I know, it's
easier.
what-
Because I've been like crackling, like I need to be able to monitor, and if there's a crackling in the thing.
Unfortunately, you usually can't hear what's actually going on the tape recorder, all you hear is what's coming in.
Yeah,
So-
with the old mics, with the old tape recorders, I actually found that you could hear when your tape stopped rolling, for
Yes,
example.
yeah,
With these
yeah.
Marantzes, you don't. The tape, you can still hear it, as though, you know, even if your
So it
tape is
doesn't help
rolling,
you
you can,
much.
so it doesn't help you. And there were a couple of times when I had the earphones on, and my tape recorder had stopped rolling.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the other thing, is that when you go out, do you know, I always say, the good mistakes I like to keep repeating. You know, people will sometimes say, oh, well, the good thing is, you know, you'll never do that again.
Oh, yeah.
Not my experience. I feel like there are some basic mistakes that you just.
What are those?
The mic, the thing stops rolling.
Yeah.
Pressing the pause button?
So, and when someone's saying something good, by now I find inevitably, I will put my eyes on my counter. I'll do it many times during an interview, but there are times when I've inadvertently, you know, there's this, oh, I did it recently. Oh my goodness, such a great moment. Guy at a coffee shop, Rob Ford interview. He was a Scarborough voter. He was telling me why he thought something was really nonsense, and it was just such a great opening scene. And I thought, oh, great, this is really happening. And then I get back to the shop. No, maybe it was there. And I thought, oh, great. And so then I have to start asking him all the questions over again. And for a little while, I was trying to be subtle about it to make him feel natural. And then he said, well, as I said, and I thought, I can't have you saying, well, as I said. I said, listen, I actually missed all of that first part, so you're going to have to act like I didn't say that. So depends how tight your time is. Sometimes you really cut to the chase on these things. You're like, work with me. But mostly, I would say what I try to do is not produce. I try not to be really stagey. I do feel as though I want it to sound like I caught them in action. So I'm not
Yep.
a producer who's and people work differently. Like some people actually produce it more. Yeah.
Can I just add one thing? I was going to say that often, you know, there's the business about get people warmed up, and you may not be using the first couple of minutes of what they say. The other thing that does, it gets you warmed up, and it allows you to listen to how that person talks. You go, oh gosh, isn't it an awful day? Yep. Oh, fuck, I've got one of those, you know? So, I mean, we're all supposed to know not to ask those kind of questions, right? Never ask a question to which a person can give a one-word answer, because inevitably, sooner or later, they will. And then you have nothing.
Except that sometimes, as I said with the smoking streeters, you know, you go
Yeah,
out,
you're
do you
okay.
smoke? It's because you want to engage them. But the other thing is that very often I go in kind of prepared to throw away the first half hour
No,
or so.
absolutely, but what I'm saying is it allows me a sense of who they are
Yeah.
and how they talk, because the
I
other
hear you,
end
yeah.
is that what you sometimes get is, oh, that must have been excruciating. It was really excruciating. And you know you have a repeater. And then you have to hold really tight not to use that too much. Oh, when you murdered your wife, when I murdered my wife. You can sometimes get people to say awful things. So but which you mustn't do. You really mustn't do that. But it does allow you to hear their speech patterns and to get a sense of what you're going to have to do to make this work.
The other thing I think that also helps sometimes very much in streeters that brings a kind of fresh energy into it is literally walking. People
Yeah,
talk a
do
little bit
stuff.
differently, yeah, and then you start to get a sense of movement in the piece.
feel like I don't have very many rules around this stuff, but whenever I turn it on, like if I, you know, I generally introduce myself to the person and sort of get their agreement with me to participate. So that means like, once they say, yeah, okay, or once, you know, they say, okay, unpause it. So in studio interviews, I tend to like to keep rolling, and sometimes people say the most extraordinary things once you're finished, and it's like, thank God, we were still rolling. You're still rolling. Like, we always know to keep it rolling. But when I'm actually outside with people, I do feel like there's a contract there, you know. And then, but at the same time, then there's also other anomalies too, where if I am clandestinely recording them, then I tell them afterwards and ask if that was cool. There was one time where we were talking about security, and it was again an active line where I actually went to one of the security guards here and tried to get in to the building, and he's like, "You're not Sook-Yin." And I'm like, "No, I'm Sook-Yin. That's my." And he's like, "I know Sook-Yin. She's classy. You're not." All this stuff. So it was like this great stuff that I had on this tape. And then afterwards, I told him what I was doing. I'm like, "Can I use it? Because it's perfect." And he's like, "Sure, okay." So whatever, he'll never forget it. Whenever he sees it. But I think in terms of getting people, we're talking about getting people to open up. Is this sort of the area?
When you start recording.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
when
don't
you
want
start
that to go
recording.
on.
Oh, yeah, okay. So, yeah, you know, these, although this is supposed to be, this is a kind of a little bit of a beast in that it takes so long to load up. So sometimes I actually use that as a sort of icebreaker with the person. So I'll be like, okay, we're ready to go. And then we'll be like, it takes like a minute, and we're both like, you know, how speedy is this? So it's sometimes using awkward moments and so forth. Waiting, you know, the two of us waiting for technology to catch up with us. Boop. So just sort of, you know, being as upfront as possible. I mean, I do think there is a manipulation that occurs, especially in editing, and you are trying to get things out of people, but trying to do it in a way that feels like that you're working together. I feel like I try to, you know, that singing thing wouldn't have worked if it was just me going, sing, just sing. Like, I had to sing with them. So it's about reciprocity. It's about, like, DNTO is about exposing and revealing. Why would someone reveal on command? You have to be equally, like, see each other eye to eye and sort of open yourself to a sort of vulnerable exchange as well.
Can I, yes, jump in, Karen?
Well, sorry, all I was going to say, just in terms of that specific question, is that, and this comes partly from being a techno geek, I will often start the tape recorder before I get out of the car.
Yes,
So
I do
that
that
I've
too.
got the damn thing, I've got the microphone tucked under my arm. I want to get the, hi there, you know,
Oh,
I want to
knocking-
get
knocking
all of
sound
the
is
walking,
fantastic,
all
yeah.
of that stuff. But mostly it's to be at ease. I feel as soon as I say, if I phone them first, they know I'm from the CBC. If I hand them a business card, they know I'm from the CBC. That's the contract,
Yeah.
period.
And it's-
That is the ethical position. That you're there as a member of the press, because you aren't always working with someone. In your situation, you are. There is the bad guy, you know, and maybe we'll have another session on this, how to speak to the bad guy. And they're often the people that don't want to talk to you. So there are a whole lot of other factors going on there. Or there is and I'll finish, there is the difficult question. A piece I did on a woman who was convicted in England. There's a whole series of wrongful convictions of women who, it was said, murdered their babies. And she had been convicted of murdering 3 of her babies. And she was ultimately acquitted on appeal, but there was still a very big lingering thing. A lot of people thought she'd killed them. At some point, you've got to ask, just to put it on the record, did you murder your children? I mean, you may ask it differently, but you've got to ask that. And I would suggest that's the last question you ask, because you may get thrown out of the house. Quite seriously, you know, if you're asking those difficult questions. And you also, I would say, know your stuff, know your equipment, know yourself. Know when you're gonna fumble and fall apart, and try and work your way around that, because we all do fumble and fall apart when we're tired or whatever. I have a colleague who could never interview sick people, couldn't handle that. Another colleague who liked experts and politicians and couldn't do people. So no, we all know who we're good at and what we're not. So know all of that. And if you've got a difficult question to ask, rehearse it in your own head. How am I going to ask that? No, and do not ask the half-hour question. And if you start the question, well, I really wanted to ask you if you just did you murder your children? Take a breath, pause, and ask it clean, and keep it short. And at least you got yourself on record. We never ended up using it, in that instance. And you do ask it at the end, because it is when you could get heaved out the door. But,
Yeah, and you ask those questions in a way that has no judgment in it, so that so that people feel as though
sometimes
they
it's
have room
hard
to
not
ask.
to. I know what I want from that person. I do not have a notebook. Occasionally when I'm interviewing someone who I find scary, for whatever reason, because they're powerful, I will write questions down. I'll try not to look at them. I just don't want anything to get in the way.
Especially when you're talking to a stranger. You
Yeah.
don't, if you haven't had the privilege of a pre-interview, you actually don't know what you will get. And there are times when I have discovered the focus back at my desk.
Oh,
once
absolutely.
Once I'm
Absolutely.
carving down my tape. But I do want to say something about doing an interview, asking a sensitive question. So this was, Danielle Grogan was going out to gather the tape in this instance, and she asked me, let's talk about it before I go. It was about a study that said that 6 out of 10 people would struggle if they missed a paycheck. And so to go out and ask people about their paychecks, about their financial situation, is a sensitive thing. It's like people say it's the last taboo area. You'll talk about how many times you have sex before you'll talk about the fact that actually you're kind of panicked about your financial situation. So what we thought, going with my rule again, that the first question you ask is one people can answer because you want them to engage. So the first question we decided we were going to ask was, what would you say, study comes out, struggle with a paycheck, what would you say is your biggest expense during the week? And so then people would say, oh, my mortgage or my rent or something like that. So they're talking to you. And then the next question was, do you have a regular paycheck? And so then they kind of say, are they freelancers? Are they contracts? Are they part-timers? What is their situation? And then we started, it was a way of engaging people. So you were asking them about something non-threatening, their biggest thing. And then, and it was interesting, she only had to walk up to 3 people, and in each case, the person gave them something usable. And in the end, it was a young, she walked up to a group of guys, and suddenly, one student said something about, I can't remember, he said something about, I'm lucky, I do have a paycheck or something like that. And she said, oh, you're lucky. And then he gave a story, unprompted by her, something about the best advice he ever got from his dad, blah, 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 blah. And in the end, they all talked about whether or not they would feel panicked. That was, as I recall, that was where the little set of streeters wrapped up. And can I say one thing, because I see Steve Wadham sitting here. One of the most useful things that I was ever told about gathering tape was from Steve, and I know he's told this to many producers over the years, but it's about it's about getting the scene that's in the person's mind's eye. And so once people start to talk to me, I'll often ask them the question, once they start to give me something that feels like a scene, like they're telling me a story, I'll say, where were you when you heard that? Show me where you were standing. It's that business of getting them to remember the detail they can still see.
Actively.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that will depend on the question, the question sort of that
Leads them to, that leads them to be able to access a memory or a situation. I think authentic curiosity, people they can tell if you're listening to them, or if you're not listening to them, or if you're,
Yeah, but that's
and-
basic. That to me
Well,
is
we
like.
need to know that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's the
I
basic
think-
equipment about curiosity. I think in some ways it's not. We're not really out there as amateur psychologists either. Sometimes we think that the best equipment for being a good storyteller is to be able to make people relax around you.
Well, I think.
I think it's for getting people to paint the moment. I don't think you even need to be a particularly relaxing person
Well,
to
I
get
think
someone to do that.
I think you ought to be engaged in listening to the person
Of
and
course.
be interested in them.
Of course,
And I-
that's so
I-
basic,
And I think that these are
Lots of people aren't.
yeah, lots of people
I
don't.
heard one on the radio the other day. When did you do this? And what happened then? Like it was, somebody'd written down a series of
Yeah.
questions and they were asked.
And also
there was
space.
No engagement.
If the person doesn't say anything, just let time pass, and
Yeah.
then they offer a bit more good listening, curiosity and listening. I know it sounds basic, but it's not a given.